we realized there was a bigger need.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Were there moments in those early days where you legitimately thought about not pursuing it or giving up?
No, because I took all my savings, every single penny, and put it into this business. So there was no option. It had to
work.
It had to work.
So if you don't mind my asking
Yes.
this.
Welcome to Moga Class channel. Hi everyone. If you are passionate about growing your business, starting up a business, maybe you are stuck at a certain point of your business, then you've just found your new favorite spot on YouTube. Thank you. Let's grow. Let's dive in. Let's grow together.
You think about Wandia at 3 years old. What was she like?
So at 3, my father, who's Kenyan, was posted to Washington, D.C. He was the commercial attaché at the Kenyan embassy in Washington. And my mother, who's Canadian, followed. And at that point, I had an older brother and 2 younger brothers.
Right.
And so imagine at 3, my mother was having children one after the other. So we were 4. I was the only girl.
Yes.
And I think I was very invisible. Like my mother was completely overwhelmed with raising these kids, taking care of the house. We didn't have any house help, cooking, cleaning. I have pictures of myself with my hair completely unkempt and my baby teeth had gaps in them. It's not even funny. Don't laugh. They have gaps because those were cavities because our teeth were never brushed. I think we were neglected, and not out of malice.
Yes.
I just think she just couldn't cope.
It was
and
the
so
load.
yeah, I mean, I've tried figuring out why I have some of the dysfunctions I have, and it takes me back to being 3,
Incredible.
3, 4, and feeling like no one really saw me.
That's incredible.
But I don't want to make it sound like she was a bad mother. She was really doing her best, but it was hard. It was hard.
What was it like growing up as an immigrant child, basically, and spending some time in the U.S. while Dad was there?
I don't remember. I mean, we left when I was 6.
Right.
So I don't remember feeling different.
Right.
I mean, being mixed race, I think when I came back to when we moved back to Kenya, because I was 6.5, and in Kenya, white people are called Mzungu.
Yes.
And so even though I'm not white, when I started going to school here,
Yes.
all the other kids were like, Mzungu, you're
yeah.
Mzungu, you're this. And I was like, what? Why are they calling me white? I'm not white. So I think that was more of a bit of a shock, like being seen as different from other kids, even though I didn't really see myself as different.
When you were younger, framing your identity, what did you see yourself as?
I think when you're very young, you're just you. You know what I mean? Like your mother's your mother, your father's your father. But yeah, I think, like I said, in Kenya, the majority of Kenyans are full African, and I was because I had a white mother, that somehow made you a little bit different. It didn't mean our lifestyle was different. Like we didn't have money, or my dad was a civil servant. My mom was a teacher at a government school, so there wasn't much money, but it still meant that you sort of were a little different.
So, as you got older,
yes,
how did you choose the path you would later follow? This path of
entrepreneurship.
His mom and dad were, civil servants. You would have had a different. They would have had a different perspective to life than the life you're living now.
So my dad was a wannabe entrepreneur.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this.
So he started tons of businesses. Like we had so many businesses that were registered, and when he passed away, it was like all these, businesses.
You got to close them down now.
But they hadn't ever done anything.
Oh my God.
So he was a dreamer, and he saw opportunities, but he wasn't able to execute on them.
Wow.
But he would talk about ideas, and he would start, and he had ideas. His ideas were always, he had an idea to do educational toys at one point, or, he wanted to, he wanted to build real estate. There were things he wanted to do, and he would talk about. But no, he never actually implemented. And I think I wasn't conscious of it at the time. Like when I was making choices, I wasn't saying, oh, I want to be like dad, or I want to be like mom. But when I look back at the things I did do, they were very similar to what my dad had done. So I did it. My first degree was economics.
Wow.
He was a civil servant for the Kenyan government. I became a civil servant working for multilateral organizations and for the British government.
Right.
And he was very interested in development.
Right.
And so I only became an entrepreneur in my mid-40s.
Right.
So for my first 20 plus years, I was I worked in international development.
100%. Yeah.
And I would remember conversations with my dad when he was working for the Kenyan government, and he would travel. He'd go to India, he'd come back, and he'd say, oh, there's so much Africa can learn from these other places. And he went to Chile once, I think in the 1970s. And he was like, these guys were as poor as we were, and look how far they've come. And this is before I think Chile went through its own whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, he would go to all these places, and those were he wasn't home often, but when he was home, those were the kind of conversations we'd have. Or when we'd go on holiday, he would put us into the car and drive us to factories.
Oh, wow.
To go and see. And in those days, there was very vibrant textile factories.
Yes.
In Kenya. And a lot of them shut down.
Shut down since,
but, factories that would make suits for men, and the fabric even was being produced in the factories. So he was always interested in, business, in productivity, in outcomes. But he was a heavy drinker. I think that got in the way.
When you say he would drive you down,
yes,
would drive to factories, I imagine this is long before cars had seatbelt rules.
Yeah, and we were many. We were like,
I knew that was coming.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we never had a station wagon, so it was a saloon car, and then you'd be like,
what car was it?
5. It was a Volvo.
Oh dear! It was one of those tin can ones, isn't it? That square shape.
But they were known to be safe.
Yes. Well.
We always believed, and my dad wrote off 3 Volvos and never got a scratch.
Wow.
So we believe that Volvos were, the safer car.
You said a few things about Dad.
Yeah.
If you'll allow me to double click. The first thing you said is he was a dreamer.
Yes.
Did you ever see him dream out loud? Was that something he ever did with you as kids?
Not in a sort of like, let's sit down and dream together, but he would say, oh, we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. And then it wouldn't happen. Yeah. Which
do you think often about that in how you live your life, that you're not the person who just says and then doesn't follow through?
I don't like, I like to deliver on my promises, especially to my kids. I think it's better to under promise and over deliver. I think I like to live with that sort of philosophy, because otherwise you're constantly disappointing someone.
It's so good.
Yeah.
A hard discipline to learn, though.
Yeah. But sometimes, and that's what I'm saying. It's better not to say you're going to do it unless you're pretty certain
that you are.
That you will do it. And like I said, the younger the child, the more I think it bothers them if you're not doing what you say you're going to do. And that sort of teaches you, I think it teaches you not to expect, which I don't think that's a good thing. I think you should have expectations.
Did you ever find in how you lived life that you might have encountered with people, either personal or in business, and immediately if they exhibited the behaviors of a dreamer who doesn't follow through, that is something that would
irk me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Guilty.
Yeah.
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 And maybe unfairly so.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
might have this I have a definite bias towards action and
Yeah.
delivery and execution.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm more drawn to people who say less and do more than, a lot. I think that some people are very gifted at talking. And actually I think I think in business it helps when you pair those people up. So some people are great at seeing the ideas. But then if they're not good at executing, then they need to find someone to sort of work beside them who can deliver. Yeah.
You said dad was a heavy drinker. How do you know?
Because he came home drunk most nights. Yeah. Actually, some nights he'd be so drunk that he wouldn't even get out of the car. So he'd he'd literally get the car into the,
And then he's off.
and then he'd pass out, and we'd wake up to go to school the next day and find him sleeping. Like
Wow.
in the car from the night before.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where was mom in all this?
Working, trying to pay the bills.
Yeah.
I mean, dad provided the home.
Yeah.
I think the deal was he was supposed to have done the home and school fees.
Yeah.
And then she would do like food and
Sure.
clothing and stuff
Sure.
like that. But then slowly, these are a lot of questions. Well, anyway, I don't mind. I think it's in, so there'd be times that we would be called back at school.
Oh no.
So assembly time.
Oh no, man.
Can the following people stay behind?
Oh no.
Because school fees hadn't
Hasn't
been
been paid.
paid. And then we'd get home, we'd be sent home, and my mom would say, I'll have to pay it. And she'd have to find the money. So then
My God.
my dad would, I think, subconsciously be like, oh, I guess you can afford to pay school fees now. So that's no longer my responsibility. But what it meant is that my mom ended up having to take on extra work. So she was a teacher in a classroom in a school during the day, and then she would do extra tuition in the evenings. And so some nights she wouldn't be getting home until 9, 10 o'clock at night from the extra classes.
My God. My God.
What did I learn from that? I think I appreciated it, but I was almost angry at her for not pushing back harder. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if my dad hadn't been there, it would have been one thing.
But he was there.
But he was there. And I think in some ways, and I don't think it would have been easy, but I know women who would, in her shoes, would have just said, let the kids stay home until he picks up his socks and does what he's supposed to do,
Yeah.
And that reinforces the message to him, this is your responsibility.
Yeah.
But my mom took it on.
Yeah.
We'd come home, electricity would have been cut off.
Yeah. Sure.
My mom would then pay. And then now he's off the hook. So she kept letting him off the hook.
Something tells me you're not a let him off the hook kind of gal. I feel like you're the kind of girl who's like, oh, I'm going to keep the hook there. Whatever the hook is. If you and I are committed, and it may both in personal, but also in business, I feel like you're the kind of person who's like, if there is a commitment that's been made on either end, I'm going to hold you to it.
I think it's important. I mean, I'm not saying that I would leave my children on the side of the road.
Sure.
And I haven't had to. Luckily, I've never been in that situation where I've had to let my children suffer.
Yeah.
Because of trying to hold on to this principle. So and that's why I'm saying maybe it's a bit unfair for me I don't want to judge my mother's choices too harshly. But it's complicated, it's complicated. And she was doing the best she could at the time. Like, she felt that was the right decision. But I look back, I think her hardest years were when we were sort of teenagers,
Yes.
young, sort of from the age of about 8, 9, 10 up until the end of high school, because that's when she just kept taking on more and more and more.
What was your relationship like with dad?
Pretty non-existent for many years. I mean, he wasn't home. He was rarely at home. And And we were a bit scared of him. Like he would come home and we'd all run to our rooms.
Wow. You're kidding. Why?
Because we didn't know if we'd be lectured. Like sometimes he'd come home and just lecture us. Like even though we haven't seen him for a week, but he'd come home and he'd be like, come here, sit down, da, 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 da. And I think it was his way of trying to sort of assert
His authority.
his authority. But we were just confused by it because you haven't been around. So yeah, it wasn't easy. I didn't hate him. I just didn't know him that well. And so much later in life, when I finished university, my mom had left him at that point and moved back to Canada. And then I decided to move home. And that's when I got to know him a bit better.
Tell me about that time.
Yeah, so he had just retired. And so he had a lot of free time. And it was only one of my brothers was here, was living in Kenya. So it was just him, and he was living with my dad. I didn't live with them, but we made a deal that we'd have dinner together every Sunday. So I would go around to his house every Sunday and we'd have dinner and we would have conversations like this. Like he would say, hey, so how was work this week? What's going on? What do you think of this thing happening? It was at a time that Kenya was going through a big political change. We were going from a single party state to a multi-party state. And he was always very fascinated by politics. Like most Kenyans, we're very political, you know? So then he would ask me, what do I think? He asked me if I had a boyfriend. I was like, what? Since when? You know, like we never, our whole
It's
lives.
always such
like
a thing when parents ask if you have a boyfriend,
you
right?
know, but just the fact that he was even open to hearing it. You know, I was 23, maybe 24 at the
Oh
time.
dear. And did you have a boyfriend?
No,
Okay.
no, not yet. No, I'm not at that point. Yeah, I'd had one in Canada and then I'd moved back. So I didn't have one. Yeah. But I was just happy that we could have that conversation.
When you got to know him at a human level, were you able to empathize a little bit with how you'd experienced him when you were younger?
Yes and no. I mean, I think we're all a function of what was put into us. I mean, he grew up. I think the difference between, I mean, my dad was born in 1932,
Sure.
right? His generation was the first generation to get a formal sort of Western education. So if I think about the difference between my grandparents, his parents, who never spoke English, never went to school, never drove a car, you know, didn't have any exposure, never left the village. And then they have a son who started off with literally no shoes, you know, walking barefoot to school, to getting a scholarship and going to Canada for university. I mean, the change, you know, that between their lives, his life, and then raising children in a city with a foreign wife. I mean, it's just
I get it.
3 generations so completely different.
I get it.
I mean, my grandmother would come to Nairobi and stay with us sometimes. And as a teenager, I was a big partier and she'd see me get dressed up to go out. First of all, how are you leaving the house at 10
And the sun is
o'clock at
coming
night? And then you're wearing a short skirt and makeup. I mean, she would just look at me like, who
What are you?
Like, what is this? It was, you know, so I think it was a lot for my parents' generation. And then he had an alcohol problem. So you throw that in. And then he's married to a woman who's from a completely different culture.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a lot they were dealing with.
Yeah.
So I still think he could have tried a bit harder.
How did you end up working for an aid organization or development organizations?
I imagine it had something to do with the kind of professions my parents had. Do you know what I mean? Like my dad being a civil servant and talking a lot to us about Kenya's journey, you know, evolution and his travels. And so I did an MBA. In
As
Cape
you
Ta-
do.
in Cape Town, actually, at UCT.
Oh, UCT,
Yes,
GSB.
I did the 1 year
Great school.
intense program.
You did the 1 year one.
I did the 1 year one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the red eye, right?
Yeah. I loved it though.
Really?
Yeah, I fell in love with Cape Town completely.
Oh dear.
So when I graduated, almost everyone in the class was either going into investment banking or management consulting.
Yes.
And so I sort of thought that's what I should do too,
Right.
because why else do you do an MBA?
Right.
And I tried it.
Did you?
So I came back to Kenya and I got a job. I had sort of been working anyway before the MBA at Citibank, but not in core banking. I was doing public affairs training, stuff like that. So I got a job at Citibank in real banking.
Wow.
And I hated it. I hated it. And I was like,
Which part of the bank were you in?
oh God, do I even remember? I
Right.
mean, it was sort of relationship management,
Right,
da, da, da,
right,
da, da.
right.
But I've never been excited. And by the way, this doesn't mean there's anything wrong if you are, but I've
Yes.
never been excited just by the idea of making money. Like making money
Right.
just for the sake of making money.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make money. That's, no, like, I'm not pretending I don't, but I want to make money doing something that excites me.
I'm with you.
I don't want to just do it because it's going to make me money.
Right.
So banking just didn't feel exciting. And then a friend of mine sent me a job ad for a job that was at the World Bank in Kenya. And it was to be the operations analyst for the World Bank country director.
Right.
And so I applied and got interviewed, got the job. And that set me down a path of working on development type programs.
So the next question,
Yes.
I really want to get you to think through.
Uh-huh.
When I was prepping for this, I was like, I'd had a look at some of the interviews that you had done, had a look at the successes that you'd had a look at your bio, your profile, what we could find online. And one of the things that jumped out at me, and this is for me what I can't connect with, I can't digest this part, is you have this like predictable professional life of all of these things that you did. And then almost as if one day you just wake up and go, I want to try entrepreneurship now. and not just that, you then go, and I want to try it in this industry. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. It's like, first, the industry you chose was not the industry everybody else chose, right? A lot of people of your capability, talent, and skill were going into other finance, fintech, all of the other stuff. And you chose a real industry that produces real products for real consumers, hires real people in the real economy. And not only that, but you then did it as an entrepreneur. I'm just like, what happened? Was there a midlife crisis? Was there a fight with Wandia when she was younger? Like, what happened?
So it wasn't like one day to the next.
Right.
Right. So yes, I think there was a bit of a midlife crisis, but the
Right.
crisis wasn't around clarity on I need to go and do entrepreneurship. It was, I don't know that I want to keep doing what I'm doing.
Sure.
So there was first a bit of disillusionment with the kind of work I was doing at the time. And I was a development advisor for the British government working in Sudan. And I had gotten into development because I wanted to work on actual programs where we could, see impact in terms of people's lives getting better. But the challenge was in a country like Sudan at the time, this was before the South Sudan had separated.
Yeah.
It was a purely political program. We were there just for the political purposes.
Right.
And that's not my strength at all.
Right.
And
Right.
so we were putting money into programs that I didn't feel were really making much of a difference.
Right.
And yeah, I was just less and less convinced about what contribution I could make.
Right.
Not that the program overall wasn't doing anything good, but just that I couldn't make a contribution. At the same time, I had become a mother. My kids were young. We had been moving around countries. We'd been in Uganda for a few years, moved to Sudan, and now we were going to move to another foreign country. And I was like, I just want to plant some roots. I
with
want my kids to experience life, growing up around the same friends, going to a school where they can be at the same school for many, many, many years. And so I had loved growing up that way, and I wanted that for my children. And so for me, the logical thing to do was to come home and move to Kenya. But because I didn't know what I was going to do, the organization I was working for said, we'll pay for you to do some coaching that will help you identify what else.
I'm with you.
And then I loved the coaching so much, I decided to become a coach.
Oh, wow. I can see that in you.
So I went and did a year-long
Coaching program.
coaching program. It was part-time, but over a year. So I did the coaching training and then the accreditation and certification. And
So you're a certified
I'm a
accredited coach.
certified accredited coach, except at no point in that whole process did I understand what it would take to make this a profession. That for this to be a profession, I need to charge quite high rates, and I need to do back-to-back coaching sessions.
Yes, ma'am.
And they would be very intense. And it would drain me.
Yeah.
And so I didn't actually end up pursuing it. So, but I went through that whole process.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad I did, because I think coaching skills are very useful skills. But during that time, I've moved back to Kenya. I'm doing my coaching. I'm not really seeing that this is going to be the path forward. I started doing a lot of dance classes and fitness classes just because I had time. And so...
See, this is what I mean with you. Now we went from coach to...
Yeah. And so in that process, and I was doing it with a very close friend, we realized that we couldn't find the things that we needed. Like we couldn't find
The attire.
dance sneakers and Pilates mats
Yes.
and stuff like that. My kids were doing ballet, and we couldn't get ballet tutus and shoes for them. And so we were like, hang on, there's a whole gap here,
market here.
in dance and fitness.
Yeah.
So that was the initial plan.
To be clear, this is the world pre-Lululemon.
Yes. Well, no, I think Lululemon was there, but
Already,
it wasn't
but they
in
weren't
Kenya.
in here.
They definitely
Yeah,
weren't here.
sure.
Actually, they're still not
They're
here.
still not. I was about to say, yeah.
I think they're in South Africa.
They are in South Africa.
Yeah, they're not here though. So yes, it was definitely, there wasn't much available. And so either you had to travel, or if somebody was traveling, you'd say, come back with my salsa shoes. Like I need proper ballroom dancing shoes.
Gotcha.
And so that was the plan. The plan was, okay, we'll start a business, because my friend and I started it together, and we'll focus on dance and fitness.
Tell me about the first 90 days of your business.
So the first 90 days it was going to be an online only business.
Right.
We were going to import all the product
Right.
and market it through schools and teachers and dance communities. And that it was going to be seamless. And then what happened was every single person wanted to come and see and touch and feel and try. And so within 90 days, my living room
Became a fitting room.
the fitting room and the inventory room and the stock, everything. And my children were like, what happened to our house? And so we quickly, within the first few months, realized this wasn't going to work.
Right.
And that's when we decided to open a physical store.
Right.
And because we needed to sign a lease and hire people and
Right.
commit to the 6 years of paying very high rent,
Right.
we said, you know what, maybe we should put some regular clothing in the store
Gotcha.
just in case. And then the clothing flew off the shelf. And that is when we realized there was a bigger need.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Were there moments in those early days where you legitimately thought about not pursuing it or giving up?
No, because I took all my savings, every single penny, and put it into this business. So there was no option. It had to.
It had to work.
It had to work.
So, if you don't mind my asking
Yes.
this, so how does the MBA trained development professional, 20 years working in corporate, decide I'm taking all my money and I'm putting it into this thing? There's a hint of a maverick there, of a risk taker.
I mean, I think I was young enough and I had built up enough sort of, experience that I knew I could always get a job.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't, yeah. I think I had the confidence in my skill set and the fact that there was a lot of, whether it was consultancy work or something else, I had a bit of a safety net to fall back on if it didn't work.
With
So,
you.
and my children's school fees was covered by their dad, so I didn't have to worry about that.
I'm with you.
So the basics were there. So I think I was broke for a long time. I mean, I don't think I paid myself a salary for a couple of years.
Wow.
Or very,
Years.
very little.
Wow.
Very, very little.
Wow.
But I also, I like being thrown into the deep end. I'm not that kind of person. You know, the people who go into the pool slowly
Yeah.
and the water's cold.
Yeah. You go head first.
I'm like, I'd rather jump. Let's just get it over with and then figure it out, just get in. Yeah. So I think that's not always a good thing though.
You mentioned that I'm going to come back to that. You mentioned that you started a business with a friend.
Yes.
How did you manage the relationship of a friendship and a business partnership?
Yeah. So we tried to run the business together.
Yes.
In the beginning, that was hard because you don't really, we hadn't taken the time to really define sort of who does what,
Yeah, roles,
who's
segregation
better
of
at what.
duties. Yeah.
And then, so over time, we started to, articulate that a bit better. And then within the second year, she was asked by her parents to go and run their family business.
Right.
So then she remained a shareholder and a director, but stopped being day to day, which probably was a good thing because I don't know how easy it is to have two chiefs.
Co-CEOs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I became the sole CEO and was able to then run it the way I wanted to. Not necessarily that it was the best way, but.
And you've been running for how long now?
14 years.
My God.
Yeah, 14 years.
I mean, they say once you survive that 5 years, you're okay.
I don't know though. Businesses collapse after.
A lot do.
Yeah, even 50 years.
Kind of like the business model is in place, right? You know what you're doing.
I mean, I think you definitely have proven that there's product market fit and there's, a need. But I actually find this phase of the business probably the hardest phase.
Why?
Because now you're at scale and now you really have to manage that.
Speaking of at scale,
Yeah.
give us a sense of how big that scale is now.
So there are two businesses within the group. I think combined, we're about 450 staff. We have 30 physical outlets across 4 countries. We produce 95% of everything we sell in-house. So we do all the product development, the design, the sampling, the production. We do all our own logistics in Nairobi. We partner outside of Nairobi, obviously, but we create all our own marketing. It's very vertically integrated. Like the only thing we do not do is produce our own fabric. So we buy fabric, but then we even customize that in-house. So we do our own printing and everything else after that. So,
Why did you take the decision to vertically integrate like this? You've now got businesses within the business?
Yeah, because we didn't have that many options.
Yes.
So in many parts of the world, I find it fascinating when I meet a fashion entrepreneur in the States who has a massive brand and they have 2 staff.
100%.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they hire a designer outsourced.
Yeah.
They send their sampling out to a sampling room somewhere else. Production is done wherever, it's sent to a warehouse. They don't own any of that. And I think that's great. And I think if we could have outsourced elements of it, we would have. But there wasn't really the option here. Like we didn't have, I tried to find factories in Asia that would produce for us, but their minimum order quantities were so huge. Their timelines were so long. And we just couldn't take that risk. We're like, well, if we have to buy 10,000 of that one style, wait 3 months,
for
pay
it to
up
land in a
front
container, yeah.
for it to land, and then no one likes it.
100%.
What do we do?
100%.
So we needed a much more sort of nimble operating model where we test, even till today, we test our new styles with much smaller quantities. And then we're able to have it in the market within a few weeks. And then we can see what people like, what they don't like, and then we can adjust accordingly. So most big fashion houses will end up discounting 30 to 40% of their product because they had to make the decision so early. Whereas we don't have anywhere near that problem.
Tell me about the complexity of expanding into different countries, in the US. This is huge, by the way. We're often used to brands going the other way, not our brands going there. Tell me about just the complexity of building a company with a culture that can compete in different geographies.
So I don't know that we have figured that out completely yet, but I would say that the culture that we've been trying to build is one where, at least when it comes to the customer, is that you are very welcome. So we try to bring that sort of African hospitality to the shop floor. And here that may not seem that unique or different, but let me tell you, in the US,
it really is.
in the US, it stands out.
Yeah.
We have people walking into the store and they're like, oh my God, you're reminding me what retail used to feel like.
Wow.
20 years ago.
Wow.
Before,
rather than this cold and clinical.
Yes.
Right.
And just, warmth, smile, come in, tell us who you are, let's
that
talk.
Karibu Kenya energy.
Yes. We take time. So in Kenya or in other parts of Africa, that might feel just normal. But it's not necessarily like that. In a lot of places you go to, it's self-service now.
That's right.
That's
right.
Whereas I like to say this story, but I mean, I've met clients who say, "Oh, Wandia, I'd really like to go to your store at this particular mall because the sales lady is my size, so she tries on for me." And I'm like, okay, that's the extent we'll go.
That's good.
To try and help you figure out what works for you. Or men will come in and say, I think the person I'm buying for is your size. Just try this on. I see, what it looks like.
What do you see Wandia and the brand in 10 years?
Okay, so I'm gonna answer because I hear more than one question there. So where do I see myself personally? Where do I see the company? And I think, to put that in context, I want to just talk a bit about what excites me right now. And really maybe 2 to 3 years after I started the business, it took me that long to understand this, but it finally, became very clear how little of what Africans wear is made in Africa.
Got that.
90+% of everything we're wearing was designed outside, designed for somebody else, produced by somebody else. And that's okay. I'm not saying that that's all bad. I think it's okay that trade happens and, goods move across the world. But it always feels a bit crazy to me that we're a continent of 1.5 billion people.
Sure.
And there is such opportunity in the fashion world to create jobs, to utilize talent, to produce products that work for us. And somehow we haven't really captured that.
That's so good.
And a lot of the effort that is being made, and I think it's wonderful, but it's still very high end. A lot of African designers are still not that accessible to the majority of Africans. And so what I would like, not just Vivo, by the way. I mean, if we do this, great, but I want very many others to do this because we are so many.
Sure.
Is that we start to see the opportunity to dress ourselves even at the most affordable level.
Got you.
So, because if we don't do it, it will continue to be done by others. And I think even where we have seen countries take firmer stances on things like let's limit how much secondhand stuff is coming in, unless we are ready ourselves to fill the gap, it's China's going to fill it.
Of course.
Others are going to fill it,
course.
right? So 10 years from now, I would like to see Vivo and the brands that we own available and accessible across Africa
Got you.
in multiple different countries, cities, and in other parts of the world as well. And I think the challenges that Black people have around the world are shared.
100%.
You know what I mean? Which is why Black skin products, Black hair products are popular in Brazil. They're popular in the US. They're popular across
here.
Africa.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to clothing, we also have certain, unique
100%.
needs,
100%.
or not even needs. I mean, some of it is needs, but it's also desires, like what works for our skin tones and our
Say it.
our sort of preferences
Preach it.
is unique
It is.
to us, and I think others are most welcome to wear it. It's like Afrobeat music. Do you know what I mean? It can be very African, but it's popular everywhere. I think African style, African color and print and vibrancy is something the world should be able to access.
I love it. It's one of my biggest frustrations, I must tell you,
Yes.
in the work that I do. My team will bail me out on this. Is I absolutely hate that because we will go through a process of putting the looks together. I hate just how, and I'll say stuff like, why is it that color? Why is it that cut? I remember we were having this conversation too, and I was like, but we're people of color.
Yes.
How come all the suits are just like bland blank or bland blue? It's just like, so you're trying to tell me we can't infuse a little bit of color? We can't bring in a little bit of identity, a little bit of, and then you go to the market and you realize there's actually nothing like that out there. There isn't anything out there that brings a sense of who we are into the apparel.
Yeah.
Either in design or language or even just what you're trying to communicate. So
I see this massive, it's like uncharted territory.
I love this.
And I think the more that we're able to sort of leapfrog, using technology, using the most modern equipment and things like that, we can make it affordable. Like, why should it be inaccessible?
Yes.
Why should, we deserve as much as anybody anywhere else
Yes.
to be able to walk into a store and buy the thing that appeals to us. And this sounds, maybe too extreme, but I'm like, unfortunately, a lot of people across this continent are, even down to their underwear,
Yeah,
are
it's a
wearing
fact.
used
Underwear.
underwear. I'm
100%.
like, that's
100%.
President Kagame was probably one of the presidents who most firmly came across and said, like, it's a matter of dignity too.
Yes.
Like, we should have,
Yes.
access to new clothing.
I think one of the first times I traveled here, maybe 15, 17 years ago, and I'd go walk down and there were different parts of the city where there was clothes being sold on like the floor. And I was like, what? And it's like secondhand clothing. And my mind, I couldn't. And more recently, I went to Ghana. And there are entire like shore fronts
Yeah.
that is just clothing that's dumped from all over the world. I'm going, hold on.
Yes.
Something surely is wrong here.
And Kenya
right?
has the highest, the amount of secondhand clothing that we import is the highest per capita in the world.
No.
And it is growing every year.
No.
Yes. And half of it is unsellable. I mean, Ghana has made this very public. They've shown you what it looks like, the amount of dumping. So it's a lot of waste. So these containers come, maybe half of it is sellable.
No.
The other half isn't.
So what then?
So that just gets thrown into waste landfills. And so it's a huge problem. But I don't even want to talk about that. I want to talk about the opportunity and the opportunity to dress ourselves. And what does that mean? One is, it means we get products that we love.
I love this.
And that work for us
I
and
love
bring out the
this.
best in us. We get to create jobs. We get to create wealth. Do you know that out of the list of the wealthiest people in the world, I think 4 of them made their money in fashion?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to be the largest population of any region. Who should dress us? And who should benefit from that? Who should capture the opportunity that offers? I think we should, at least to a large extent. And I think part of it comes from building our own brands. You know, I follow a lot of the South African brands. I mean, there's a shoe brand. You know, I think these stories these need to become household names. And we need to make sure that they can go across the continent and not just, which is why I think this Africa free trade and all of those things need to be made a reality sooner rather than later. Because the rest of the world is now worried about themselves.
The contestation.
And we need to be focused on creating wealth amongst
ourselves.
us.
And I think, so to your point, I think for this generation, that is so important. We are connected enough now that we should be able to do this.
And we're connected through music, the internet, social media. I mean, people follow. Look what a hit you are when you come here. Like, were you surprised at how many Kenyans, you know, follow you? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if that's happening in your space, in sports, in music, shouldn't it happen in fashion too?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
2 more questions.
Okay.
First, what is on your gratitude list? When you think about things that you're grateful for, what's on that list?
So it depends how specific I want to be. You know, I'm always grateful for life and for my children and for health and things like that. But I think, you know, when I try to ask myself on a more regular basis, what am I grateful for today? Because it's very easy to go through a day and not necessarily see that big. Not every day is going to give you this big thing.
That's so good.
But there are days that you can just be grateful that friend picked up the phone when you called them and listened. You know, I mentioned that I recently lost my mother, and I don't have a very extended family that's here. The brother that I'm closest to lives in Canada. And in a Kenyan or in an African context, you'll know how much family comes together when you lose somebody.
Yeah.
I have a very close South African friend, and he lost his dad, so I flew down. This was a few years ago, and I was completely blown away by how many scones people brought. I had never seen so many.
We are a scones people. They bring them in the big
buckets. Buckets and buckets and buckets.
And everybody comes with scones.
Do you know what I mean?
And they have tea for the whole week, right?
So we have a version of that. We don't eat scones here, but we have a version of that. And literally my friends, because I don't have that family here, they became the family they took over. Honestly, I kept saying to them, I'm in mourning, but I can walk. Like, I can move. You know what I mean? They wouldn't let me even get up to go to the kitchen.
So good.
To make a cup of tea. Like, they organized prayers, they organized food, they let people know, and people were coming to the house, and people, you know, so I'm in a state of very deep gratitude right now that we were, you know, that we were surrounded and embraced. And it doesn't, you know, it doesn't take away the pain, but there's pain if you're on the floor and there's pain if you're on a pillow. Do you know what I mean?
Amen.
And it's the pillow and the surrounding that has helped.
Last question. What is on your prayer list? What are you praying for?
My approach to prayer is I don't pray for something very specific. I don't pray for an outcome. I pray for guidance and for the grace to accept the outcome, because I kind of think I don't have the foresight to always know that the outcome is the right or wrong one.
Amen.
Do you know what I mean?
Amen.
And so,
He makes all things good in his time.
yes. But then what do we need is that patience,
100%.
that
100%.
that grace.
Preach it.
So that's what I pray for, and that's when I'm most grateful, is when I know that there's something more than me alone that's helped me manage and deal,
So good.
with whatever it is I'm dealing with.
That's so good.
And when I'm not dealing with it, I pray for forgiveness. Because there are many times that I don't extend the grace, that I'm way too hard on people. I'm quick to judge, I'm quick to assume. And then you realize that your assumptions were all wrong, and that they're doing the best they can with
what they've
with
been
what
given.
they have or what's in front of them right now. And so my prayers are, thank you, forgive me, and guide me.
Wow.
Those would be the gist of them.
Wandia, it's been such a privilege to spend time with you. The first time we met, you don't know this, but I had watched, because I was told that you and I would be on a stage together. And as is my process, I will research the people I'm with. And then I'd read press material about you, and then I'd gone and watched some stuff. And I must confess, I just found you fascinating. Fascinating. And the question I constantly was trying to answer is, what is this woman doing? Because I couldn't digest the perceived opportunities you would have had versus the life you have chosen. I was just like, this is just such a hard thing to do. And it's a hard time to do it because the potential upside in so many other things, it's just so easy and so clear. And she has the education and the network, and what is she doing? And then I got to meet you. And the first thing about you that struck me was your smile. I was like, she's good people. And then we started chatting. I was like, and she's smart. We're going to get along.
Oh,
So you don't know this, but just the way that you do life is a meditation and a minister to me. So
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for having me, and
you.
thank you for coming to Kenya.
Yes.
And keep coming. And on one of your visits, if not this one, please come and visit our factory and
Well,
speak to my team.
done. So the
Yes.
factory thing is in. I
Okay.
have only one condition.
Okay.
You need to kit me out.
Aha!
Okay, so-
Oh dear. Okay. Our menswear range is very
I'm
limited,
aware.
but
That's exactly why I'm throwing it in there.
We can tailor something, and I would love to hear what you see as the future for men's fashion
Yeah.
in Africa, because I think it's very unexplored.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kenyan men need to become more courageous as well. We
In
tend
their
not-
fashion,
West African men are far more
Yes.
out. I don't know
Yes,
what are
yes.
South African men like?
Similar. I mean, I think South African men are, insofar as it pertains to, I think also quite expressive. We have a lot of European influences.
Yes. Do you do the suits
We do a lot of the suits.
Okay. with color?
With color sometimes.
Nice.
That's what I was saying. Like when you were
Yeah.
talking about men's stuff, I'm just like, if you wanted to see where our formal clothing will be next season, you look at where Europe is this season.
Okay.
We kind of we follow on to
Yeah,
what
yeah,
Europe
yeah.
is doing. But the younger generation, I just watched this younger generation, the way they dress, very adventurous. And I think it's going to change the tone and texture of how we choose to express. West Africans for sure are just next level.
Next level.
They're next level. The Ghanaians,
Yeah.
the Nigerians, but the Ghanaians specifically. The men there will
Do you get
will
your
kit
stuff
out.
tailored or yeah?
All of my stuff is tailored.
Really?
Yeah. And so I'm quite excited for us to have a sidebar conversation about
Yeah.
where is the opportunity set for
Yeah.
men's fashion.
Yes.
To what you were saying, affordable at scale, but aspirational and expressive at the same time.
Yeah, and that resonates.
That resonates.
And that inspires. And I think the younger generation is far more willing to be adventurous. My generation,
For sure.
yeah. But yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was our episode, family. I'll see you on the other end of this. Cheers.